The war had been raging for longer than most could remember. Entire planets had been stripped bare, their skies thick with smoke and ash, their oceans poisoned by weapons of unimaginable power. Humanity had fought bravely, but at a cost that weighed on every soldier's soul. Commander Elias Varon had witnessed more deaths than he could count, and yet he still carried the heavy burden of responsibility on his shoulders. His troops respected him for his calm, precise commands, but even they sensed the exhaustion behind his steady gaze. Each day of the war seemed to stretch into endless nights, and every victory was hollow when it came at the cost of so many lives. Elias stood on the observation deck of the human flagship, the Aegis, staring at the stars that seemed indifferent to the suffering below. The fleet was scattered across the Marinthian sector, patrolling the front lines of the war against the Kitharans, an alien race whose reputation was both terrifying and legendary. The Kitharans were often called vampires by human intelligence, not for blood in the literal sense, but for their unnerving ability to drain energy from machinery and weapons, to invade systems and turn human technology against them. Reports described their fleets as ghostly, moving through the void like shadows, attacking without warning, leaving death in their wake. Elias had never met one of them face to face, at least not outside the heat of battle. Until now, his understanding of the Kitharans had been through satellite images, intercepted communications, and the occasional captured pilot. But tonight, the war would offer him a different perspective. A faint signal blinked on the main console. It was weak, irregular, and almost imperceptible, but Elias recognized it immediately as an SOS. He frowned. Distress signals in contested space usually meant danger, often traps designed to lure fleets into ambushes, but something about this signal was different. The coordinates were deep within a contested asteroid field, an area so heavily mined and patrolled that few ships dared enter without backup. "Commander," Lieutenant Harris spoke up, stepping forward. "It's a Kitharan vessel. We're receiving an SOS from one of their ships." "It's drifting, damaged." Elias studied the data. The ship's signature was unlike any Kitharan warship he had seen. The hull was elongated, almost organic in its design, and the energy readings were unstable, fluctuating in a way that suggested internal damage. "Show me visuals," he said. The screen flickered, revealing the ship among jagged asteroids. Its surface shimmered faintly under the distant starlight, and the ship seemed to pulse, almost as if it were alive. Elias leaned closer, intrigued despite himself. There was a sense of vulnerability, a fragile loneliness in that vessel that spoke of something more than the typical alien threat he had fought against for so long. "Commander, it could be a trap," Harris warned. "Kitharans don't send distress calls for the sake of mercy." "They'll lure us in and strike." Elias shook his head. "I've spent years fighting them, Lieutenant, and I've learned that not all of them want war. Sometimes the bold choice is the one no one expects. We're going in." Preparations were made swiftly. A small strike team would board the vessel, lightly armed but ready for anything. Elias himself would lead. As they approached the derelict Kitharan ship, the Aegis's sensors picked up no defensive systems online. The silence was eerie, the kind that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. Elias stepped into the airlock, his suit humming with life support functions. The hatch opened with a hiss, revealing the interior of the Kitharan vessel. It was dark, dimly lit by pulsating energy lines along the walls, casting the corridors in a soft violet glow. The air was thin but breathable, thanks to the emergency systems, and the faint scent of alien minerals filled the space. And then he saw her. She was unlike anything Elias had ever encountered. The Kitharan woman sat slumped against the wall, her form slender and graceful, yet radiating strength. Her skin seemed almost translucent, shimmering faintly under the dim lights, and her eyes, large, deep violet and glowing softly, met his instantly. There was an intensity there, a piercing awareness that made Elias take a careful step back. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice calm, measured, and melodic, carrying a weight that seemed to belong to someone far older and wiser than her appearance suggested. "I am the daughter of the Kitharan Council. You are human." Elias nodded slowly, his mind racing. Every instinct screamed caution, yet he could not look away. "Yes, Commander Elias Varon, your vessel, you called for help." Lyra's gaze did not waver. "Yes, my ship was attacked by a faction of my own people. They wish to continue this war indefinitely. I do not. I need your assistance." A ripple of disbelief passed through Elias. You want us to help you, after everything, after all the war? Lyra nodded. Not all of my people are like the ones you have fought. Some of us desire peace, but we are few. My presence here, it is proof that not all Kitharans wish for destruction. But I cannot survive alone, and I cannot convince my people to stop without the strength of your kind. Elias studied her, weighing the decision. Every part of him knew that helping her could be dangerous, that it could compromise the fleet. Yet, something in her eyes, something that spoke of honesty, courage, and determination, pulled at him. The war had taught him that sometimes the bold choice, the dangerous choice, could change everything. Lieutenant, he said finally, we're bringing her back. Prepare for extraction. The boarding team moved swiftly, assisting Lyra as they navigated back through the corridors to the exit point. As they approached the airlock, alarms suddenly blared. Harris shouted, "Incoming, enemy patrols, they've tracked us." Lyra's eyes flashed. "They are after me. They will not stop until I am dead." Elias moved instinctively, placing himself between her and the boarding team. The airlock doors closed just as energy pulses struck the outer hull. The human ship returned fire, but the Kitharan attackers were swift, intelligent, and merciless. Yet, through coordination and quick thinking, Elias guided Lyra safely aboard the human vessel. As the doors sealed, Elias allowed himself a breath of relief. Lyra stood in the center of the room, still recovering from the ordeal, her violet eyes scanning him. "You saved me," she said simply. There was no arrogance in her voice, only a calm acknowledgement of the act. Elias nodded. "And I saved more than you realize. If your people continue this war, countless lives will be lost. We can't let that happen." Lyra's gaze softened slightly. "You understand more than most humans. Perhaps that is why you are here." In the following hours, as the Aegis moved away from the asteroid field, the two spoke quietly. Lyra revealed the fractures within her people, how a faction of Kitharans, the extremists, had pushed for unending war, disregarding the consequences for both human and alien lives. She described her desire for peace, her fear for her family, and the dangerous position she now found herself in as the sole representative of her faction willing to negotiate. Elias listened intently. His mind churned with possibilities, strategies, and the impossible decision that might come next. To end the war, he realized, he might have to make a choice that no human commander had ever considered. Lyra looked at him with an intensity that made him swallow hard. "There is a way to stop this war," she said softly. "One union can change everything. One bond between our people can bring peace." Elias frowned. "A union?" "A marriage," Lyra admitted, her voice steady. "A pact, not just between individuals, but between species. My people honor such bonds above all treaties. If you agree, if you accept, the war could end." He stared at her in disbelief. The idea seemed impossible. How could a marriage between a human and a Kitharan, a warrior and a creature of legends, bring peace to a galaxy soaked in blood? And yet, as he looked into her eyes, he felt the weight of truth, of the stakes before him. This was more than strategy. This was a choice that could decide the fate of countless worlds. Elias swallowed, trying to make sense of it. "I need to think," he said finally. This is unlike anything I've ever faced." Lyra nodded. "I understand time is short. My enemies are relentless, and your fleet may not hold indefinitely. The choice must be made soon." That night, as Elias walked the observation deck alone, he looked at the stars and reflected on the impossible position he found himself in. He had spent years fighting, strategizing, and surviving, but now survival meant more than weapons and fleets. It meant courage, trust, and perhaps even love. The war would continue unless he made a decision that defied all expectation. He could fight as usual, risking more death and destruction, or he could accept Lyra's proposal, uniting two species in a way no one could imagine. The galaxy held its breath, and Elias Varen knew that the moment of choice had arrived. The stars outside the Aegis glimmered coldly, indifferent to the struggles of two species whose survival now depended on choices few could imagine. Commander Elias Varen could not sleep. The weight of the decision pressed down on him like gravity itself. Lyra, the Kitharan princess, had chosen to trust him, to reveal the possibility of ending a war that had claimed billions of lives. Yet that trust came with a heavy burden, one that could make him a hero or a fool. He walked the observation deck, fingers trailing along the railing, staring at the endless void. The hum of the ship's engines was the only sound, and even that seemed distant, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. Ilias knew that accepting Lyra's proposal meant more than just a personal decision. It meant becoming the symbol of peace for two warring civilizations. It was a responsibility heavier than any fleet command or battlefield strategy he had ever carried. Lyra approached silently, her steps measured, graceful, and almost soundless. She stopped beside him, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight. "You are thinking too much," she said softly, her voice carrying a calm certainty that only made him think harder. "I'm thinking about billions of lives," Ilias replied without turning. "And the fact that you're asking me to marry you, to become the bridge between humans and Kitharans, it's not just my choice. It's a decision that will shape the future of the galaxy." Lyra nodded. "I know. That is why I came to you, not a general, not a politician, but a man who has seen war firsthand. You understand sacrifice, and you understand the cost of continued fighting. This choice, it requires someone who is brave enough to put trust before fear." Ilias exhaled slowly. Trust before fear. It sounded simple, but he knew the reality was far more complicated. There were factions in both human and Kitharan ranks who would not accept this union. Extremists who thrived on war, who would see him killed, or worse, use him as a pawn in further conflict. Yet as he looked at Lyra, he saw the truth in her eyes. She wanted peace, and she could not achieve it alone. "I need time," he said finally, though he knew he was running out of it. "Time to weigh the consequences, time to ensure the fleet and the people under my command can accept this, time to make sure I am making the right choice." Lyra tilted her head, as though she understood everything without judgment. "Time is a luxury we do not have, Commander. My enemies are already hunting me. Every moment we wait increases the risk that the extremists will strike, and you know how fragile the human fleet is at the edge of this war." Ilias turned to face her. "Then we prepare. We prepare for the possibility that accepting your proposal may come at a cost, and if that is the case, I will accept that cost, for peace, for life." Lyra's lips curved slightly into the faintest of smiles. "Then we begin." The following hours were filled with tense planning. Ilias convened his senior officers, explaining Lyra's situation, her proposal, and the stakes involved. Reactions were mixed. Some officers expressed doubt, disbelief, or outright anger. How could a human commander marry an alien? Could such a union truly end the war? Others saw the potential, the chance to avoid further bloodshed, and supported him cautiously. Meanwhile, Lyra shared information about Kitharan factions, the extremists who opposed peace, the moderate factions who might accept negotiation, and the internal politics that had fueled the decades-long war. Her knowledge of Kitharan's strategy was invaluable, revealing weaknesses in enemy plans and opportunities for human forces to strike strategically without unnecessary casualties. Ilias worked tirelessly alongside her, analyzing intelligence reports, cross-referencing star charts, and running simulations. The two of them developed a plan that relied on both human ingenuity and Kitharan insight, a combination of tactics that could protect the fleet and create leverage for peace negotiations. As the first glimmers of light from a distant star bathed the bridge in soft hues, the fleet sensors picked up movement. A Kitharan war fleet, far larger than anything Ilias had anticipated, was advancing toward the human positions. They were swift, efficient, and deadly. Lyra's expression grew serious. "They have tracked us. They know I am here. Their goal is to eliminate me and destroy any chance of negotiation. If they succeed, the war will continue without end." Ilias tightened his jaw. "Then we ensure they do not succeed. Lieutenant, alert all units. Prepare defensive maneuvers. And Lyra, I will need your guidance in this. Every advantage you can provide." Lyra nodded, her eyes narrowing. "I will do what I must. But know this, Commander, this battle is not just about survival. It is a test of trust. If you fail to act decisively, both our peoples will suffer." The Aegis and its supporting vessels moved into position. Human and Kitharan technologies intermingled in the strategy, as Lyra guided them through asteroid fields, using the terrain to their advantage. The Kitharan attackers were precise, exploiting weaknesses in formation, but the humans adapted quickly, anticipating maneuvers and countering effectively. Amid the chaos of energy beams and warning alarms, Ilias found a rhythm in command that felt almost instinctive. He and Lyra worked seamlessly, the trust between them growing with each passing moment. Her knowledge of enemy tactics saved lives repeatedly, while his decisions ensured the fleet maintained cohesion under fire. At one point, a strike craft breached the outer perimeter, heading directly for Lyra's location on the flagship. Without hesitation, Elias ordered an intercept. He piloted a small fighter himself, maneuvering through debris and enemy fire to reach the craft before it could strike. Lyra monitored the enemy's movements remotely, guiding him with precision. Together, they neutralized the threat, saving hundreds of crew members and preserving the flagship's integrity. As the battle drew to a tense standstill, the Kitharan fleet retreated, likely reassessing their strategy. The humans had survived the first wave, and Elias knew that the next challenge would be even greater. In the quiet aftermath, Lyra approached him once more. "Commander, this is what I meant when I spoke of trust. We survived because you trusted in my knowledge, and I trusted in your leadership. This is the bond that can extend beyond this battle. This is what our union can symbolize." Elias nodded slowly, understanding the gravity of her words. The marriage she proposed was not just a personal union. It was a pact that could influence an entire galaxy, a living symbol of collaboration and trust between species. Hours passed, and the fleet maintained a cautious patrol, expecting further attacks. During this time, Elias reflected deeply. Accepting Lyra's proposal would mean standing against not only potential enemies, but also dissent within his own ranks. Some humans might never accept an alien as a partner, much less a Kitharan vampire. And yet the alternative, continuing the war, was far worse. Billions of lives would be lost if he chose inaction. Finally, he called Lyra to his private quarters. She entered silently, her presence commanding yet serene. "Have you decided?" she asked, her voice gentle, almost a whisper. Elias looked at her, seeing not just an alien warrior, but a being of intelligence, courage, and resolve. "I accept." Her eyes widened slightly, then softened. "You understand what this means?" "I understand," he said firmly. "It is not just a marriage. It is a commitment to peace, a bond that will influence countless lives, and I will stand by it no matter the cost." Lyra's lips curved into a small smile. "Then we begin the ritual. But know this, Commander, once it is complete, there will be no turning back. Your lives, our lives, are intertwined from this moment onward." The ritual was unlike anything Elias had experienced. It combined Kitharan ceremonial tradition with a subtle psychic link that bound their wills and intentions. He felt a strange warmth, a sense of unity and clarity that filled him, connecting his thoughts with hers. Lyra's presence was both soothing and exhilarating, and he realized that the bond went far beyond strategy. It was trust, respect, and the potential for something deeper. When the ritual concluded, a pulse of energy rippled through the ship and then across the sector. Sensors detected subtle shifts in Kitharan communications, as if the extremists themselves felt the weight of the bond. The war did not end instantly, but hesitation rippled through enemy ranks. Their attacks slowed, their decisions became cautious, and commanders who had been resolute in destruction paused, sensing that the dynamics had shifted. Elias and Lyra stood side by side, looking out at the stars. The first step toward peace had been taken, but the journey was far from over. They would face resistance, doubts, and attacks, yet the knowledge that they had begun to change the course of history strengthened them. Lyra's hand brushed against his. "This is only the beginning," she said. Elias nodded. "Then we face it together, for our people and for the galaxy." As the Aegis resumed patrol, moving cautiously through contested space, both human and Kitharan crews sensed something different. A symbol of unity had been forged in the unlikeliest of circumstances, and the galaxy began to hold its breath, waiting to see whether courage and trust could truly overcome centuries of hatred and war. For Elias Varan, the choice had been made. The war's outcome would no longer be dictated solely by fleets and weapons. It would be influenced by trust, by cooperation, and by the bond he had formed with a Kitharan vampire woman who had chosen hope over destruction. And in that moment, amidst the quiet hum of the flagship and the distant glow of distant stars, Elias understood that the galaxy's fate, and perhaps the fate of life itself, had changed forever. The galaxy was quiet in a way it had not been for centuries. Planets once scarred by relentless war now held the faintest signs of recovery, and fleets that had roared through space with weapons primed now moved with cautious observation rather than aggression. Yet the calm was fragile, a tension that hung in every communication channel and every observation deck. Commander Elias Varen knew that peace, while begun, was far from guaranteed. Lyra stood beside him on the bridge of the Aegis, her violet eyes scanning the starfield, attentive to every sensor reading and subtle anomaly. She had become more than a guest or ally. The ritual that had bound them had created a partnership stronger than either technology or fleet command. Their thoughts were aligned in a way that allowed instant understanding, a connection that made coordination seamless. "Commander," Lyra said, her voice soft but urgent, "I detect movements on several Kitharan systems. Extremists are still resistant to the idea of peace. They are gathering fleets in secret, preparing for sabotage." Elias leaned over the console, studying the readings. "How many ships are we talking about?" "Several dozen, hidden beyond detection grids. Their goal is not only to attack human settlements but to assassinate leaders advocating for peace, including members of my council who support the Union," Lyra explained. Elias clenched his jaw. "Then we act swiftly. We cannot allow them to undo what we have achieved. Notify all human and moderate Kitharan forces. Coordinate a strike that neutralizes these extremists without unnecessary destruction. We need them contained, not provoked." The plan was intricate. Human tactical teams would coordinate with moderate Kitharan fleets to create blockades around extremist systems. Precision strikes would disable warships and communications without harming civilian populations. It required trust at every level, a difficult proposition when centuries of conflict had bred suspicion. As the operation began, Elias and Lyra moved from ship to ship, guiding fleets through the maneuvers. Lyra's insight into Kitharan strategy proved invaluable. She predicted movements, intercepted communications, and identified weaknesses in extremist formations. Elias' leadership ensured that human forces remained organized, efficient, and responsive. Together, they were an unstoppable combination. During the first engagement, a fleet of extremist Kitharan warships attempted a surprise attack on a human colony. The colony's defenses were modest, and casualties could have been severe. Elias, aboard the Aegis, coordinated human fighters and moderate Kitharan vessels, using Lyra's guidance to exploit the attackers' blind spots. Energy beams streaked through space, lighting the void with blue and violet trails. The battle was swift but decisive. Extremist ships were disabled, retreating in disarray, while the human colony's defenses remained intact. Elias watched from the bridge as the enemy retreated, noting the precision of the operation. "We cannot let them regroup," he said, determination in his voice. Lyra nodded. "I can identify their next likely targets. We must intercept them before they can act." The following days were a flurry of activity. Elias and Lyra coordinated strikes, defenses, and negotiations simultaneously. Their partnership had become legendary within the fleets. Soldiers whispered of the human commander and the Kitharan princess who fought as one, moving with perfect synchronization, achieving victories without unnecessary loss of life. Yet the most challenging battle was not fought with weapons, but with diplomacy. Messages were sent to extremist factions, proposing surrender and peace under the protection of both human and moderate Kitharan authorities. Many resisted, unwilling to accept that a human could stand alongside a Kitharan in unity. Elias understood their fear. "They do not trust us," he said to Lyra, "and why should they? I would hesitate too if I were in their position." Lyra's eyes were steady. "Trust is built, Commander. Actions speak louder than words. We show them that we are willing to fight not for victory, but for life itself." That will be the message they cannot ignore. The strategy worked. Over weeks, extremist fleets were cornered and their leaders brought to negotiation. Some surrendered voluntarily, others were contained through tactical interventions, and the galaxy slowly shifted toward the fragile promise of peace. Meanwhile, Elias and Lyra's bond continued to deepen. The ritual that had united them was more than ceremonial. It created a link of understanding, empathy, and trust. In the quiet moments between operations, they shared conversations that revealed their pasts, their fears, and their hopes. Lyra spoke of her people, of centuries of tradition, and the weight of leadership she carried. "My family, my council, they do not all see the future as I do," she confided. "Some believe that war is the only way to maintain order. They cannot imagine that peace is possible without submission or conquest." Elias listened, understanding the challenge. "Change is always difficult," he said. People fear what they cannot control, but what we are doing, it is proof that cooperation can succeed. They will see it in time. And if they do not, she asked softly, a shadow crossing her features. Then we continue to fight not against each other, but for life itself, Elias replied firmly. We have already proven that hope is stronger than fear. We cannot stop now. Their partnership was tested when intelligence reported a large extremist fleet moving toward a neutral planet, one rich in resources but defenseless. Time was critical. Elias and Lyra coordinated a multi-pronged strike, moving faster than any previous operation. Human ships provided defense, while moderate Kitharan vessels created diversions. The battle that followed was intense. Energy beams flared across space, starships maneuvered through asteroid fields, and communication networks were jammed by electronic interference. Yet amidst the chaos, Elias and Lyra operated in perfect synchrony. She guided fighter movements with precision, predicting enemy maneuvers, while Elias made command decisions that kept their forces cohesive and effective. In a critical moment, an extremist warship broke through the blockade, targeting a civilian transport. Elias acted without hesitation, piloting a small craft himself to intercept the ship. Lyra's psychic link allowed her to provide instant guidance, alerting him to weak points and optimal angles for attack. The enemy vessel was disabled before it could strike, saving countless lives. The victory was not without cost. Several ships sustained damage, and human and Kitharan crews were injured. Yet the operation achieved its objective. The extremist fleet was neutralized, and the neutral planet remained unharmed. The success sent a powerful message across the galaxy. Peace was not a dream, it was possible. With the immediate threat addressed, Elias and Lyra turned their attention to long-term stability. They facilitated negotiations between human leaders and moderate Kitharan council members, creating agreements that would prevent further conflict and ensure cooperation in defense, trade, and cultural exchange. The process was delicate. Centuries of distrust had created deep scars. Leaders from both sides were cautious, often skeptical of each other's intentions. Yet the symbolic power of Elias and Lyra's union could not be ignored. Their marriage was more than personal. It was a living testament to the possibility of coexistence, a proof that two very different species could find common ground. During one particularly tense negotiation, a human ambassador voiced concern. Commander Varen, you have risked everything by uniting with a Kitharan. How can we trust that this union will hold, that your influence will not compromise our security? Elias met the ambassador's gaze steadily. Trust is built through action. Every decision I have made since meeting Lyra has been for the protection of life, human and Kitharan alike. Our union is not a threat, it is a bridge, a demonstration that collaboration can achieve what war never could. Lyra added, her voice calm yet commanding, peace is not a fragile thing but a choice. It requires courage, commitment, and the willingness to see beyond fear. Commander Varen has shown all of these qualities. This is why I stand with him and why our peoples can, too. Over time, more Kitharan factions began to accept the idea of peace. Extremists who refused were isolated, their influence waning as moderate forces strengthened. The human fleets adapted to the new reality, cooperating with Kitharan allies to rebuild war-torn sectors. Communication networks reopened, trade resumed cautiously, and refugees began to return home. Amid these efforts, Elias and Lyra shared quiet moments that reminded them why the bond they had forged was so powerful. They walked together through the corridors of the Aegis, observing human and Kitharan crews working side by side. They spoke of the lives saved, the planets preserved, and the future they hoped to build together. One evening, as the flagship hovered above a recovering planet, Lyra looked out at the horizon, violet eyes reflecting the twin suns. "It is strange," she said softly, "to see life returning where so much was destroyed. To know that the choice of one man and one woman can change the course of history." Elias placed a hand on hers. "It is not strange. It is proof that courage, trust, and the willingness to act for what is right can overcome even the greatest challenges. That is humanity's greatest strength, and yours, Lyra, as well." She smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and affection. "Together, then, for the galaxy." "Together," he echoed. The months that followed were filled with rebuilding and reconciliation. Cities once leveled by war were restored, trade routes reopened, and cultural exchanges between humans and Kitharans flourished. Education programs taught the next generation about the horrors of war and the possibilities of cooperation. Stories of Elia's and Lyra's courage spread across star systems, inspiring hope and unity. And through it all, the bond between the human commander and the Kitharan vampire woman remained steadfast. Their union had not only symbolized peace but had created it. They had faced the challenges of distrust, battle, and centuries of hatred, and emerged not only victorious but transformed. As Elia stood once more on the observation deck, Lyra beside him, he felt the weight of history and the lightness of hope simultaneously. The war had ended, not with a final battle or the destruction of enemies, but with a choice to trust, to unite, and to act for life itself. In that moment, Elias understood the truth. The galaxy would remember this time not for the wars that had ravaged it, but for the courage of two beings who chose connection over conflict. The peace they had forged was fragile, yes, but it was alive, and it would endure because it was built on trust, action, and the unwavering belief that life, in all its forms, was worth saving. As the twin suns dipped below the horizon of the recovering planet, Elias and Lyra stood hand in hand, watching a galaxy slowly heal. The war had ended the moment they accepted each other, and the future, bright, challenging, and full of possibility, awaited them both. The stars above twinkled as if in silent celebration. The galaxy had witnessed the improbable, and yet, through courage, unity, and trust, a new era had begun.